The New York Knicks have until October 23rd to offer Immanuel Quickley a contract extension. And the burning question headed into this offseason for the New York Knicks was how much money they were going to pay Immanuel Quickley and for how many years. Well, thanks to multiple NBA league sources, we now know that in order for the New York Knicks to retain one of the finalists for Sixth Man of the Year in Immanuel Quickley, it could take Jalen Brunson level money. We're going to break down exactly what the report is and how much money we could be looking at paying Immanuel Quickley before the season starts. We're going to look into this and so much more today. Let's get started. Immanuel Quickley could be seeking Jalen Brunson level money this offseason. So everybody's been talking about Immanuel Quickley, his performance this past regular season, in the postseason, and obviously how much money did he earn from the New York Knicks and what that contract is going to look like. And according to Sean Devaney of theheavy.com, we have a little bit more information as to what that number could potentially be. According to Sean Devaney, Immanuel Quickley could be seeking Jalen Brunson type money from the Knicks. His exact quote is the following. One NBA executive said the expected asking price for Quickley will put him in the range of what Brunson got from the Knicks. 4 years and $104 million. That might be a little too rich for New York, but Quickley can be expected to get something at least in the range of $80 million for 4 years. The $80 million for 4 years part, we more or less knew for weeks now, because Michael Scotto, who's actually going to be on the show in the first week of October, so shout out to him. He's from Hoops Hype, and he first reported alongside with Ian Bagley that Immanuel Quickley's floor in terms of the least amount of money he could potentially get from the New York Knicks would be $80 million. So to believe that Immanuel Quickley could get Jalen Brunson money, which would put him in the range of about maybe 4 years, $100 million or something around that, is not unheard of or out of the question. Because in that same report from Michael Scotto, he basically doubled down and stated that Quickley's ceiling in terms of contract extension could go upward to $100 million. And then we have this report from Sean Devaney from theheavy.com stating that he's hearing from multiple NBA executives, because this is not the first time Devaney has reported this, that Immanuel Quickley is likely looking at money in the range of what Brunson got from the Knicks. I don't know about you guys, and I'm not saying Immanuel Quickley is not deserving of the money, so don't get it twisted here. But we just paid Josh Hart so much money, and he's likely coming off our bench. And now you're telling me we might tie up nearly $100 million over the next 4 years in Immanuel Quickley, whose primary responsibility for the New York Knicks is likely going to be coming off the bench next season to try to get that Sixth Man of the Year award that eluded him this past season. In my opinion, he should have won it over Malcolm Brogdon, but again, that's just my opinion. Maybe he might get that award this upcoming season, but that's not going to be without a cost from the New York Knicks. Now, obviously, the Knicks don't have to pay him. And if the Knicks don't pay him, he can go into next season with that same minimal contract. I believe it's around $4 million. And then at the end of the season, he can become a restricted free agent, and the Knicks can match any offer that any other team gave him. However, they may not want to take that risk, because if he outplays what he did last season, that $100 million might look like a steal, because he might want way more than that if he exceeds and excels in everybody's expectations. But we don't know what's going to shake out next season. If the offseason is any indication, though, Immanuel Quickley has been working on his shooting with a lot of NBA legends and lethal shooting specialists. So because of that, you expect his game to take a leap. And if it does, and the Knicks don't pay him, it might cost them more later on to sign him than it would right now. So that's something to take into account if you're Leon Rose and the New York Knicks. However, $100 million for another player coming off of your bench is a really hard sell for me. $100 million extra dollars on your bench next to Josh Hart, and they're not starting. That's a lot of money to give to guys that are really going to contribute to your bench, not your starting lineup. And I'm not saying they're not important. I'm not saying they're not deserving. And I'm also not saying that those contracts, in the grand scheme of things, don't look good around the NBA or the league. They definitely are movable. Josh Hart's contract is extremely movable. But in regards to Immanuel Quickley, I don't know how to feel about his particular contract yet because the Knicks haven't given him that extension yet. I have to wait and see what it looks like before I can understand it, digest it, and give you an opinion on it. But if it's anything like Josh Hart's contract, I know I'm going to feel really okay about it. As long as it's movable, I'm not going to have a problem about it. I just argue that while these contracts aren't bad in terms of league-wide if in comparison to other players, I argue that for the New York Knicks, it's just too expensive. Normally, you'll draft these players. You're not going to get them like this and then pay them an extraordinary amount of money. And Immanuel Quickley's sake, you did draft him, so there is a caveat there where you should pay him if he's playing up to par. But the trick here is that you don't want to overpay Immanuel Quickley either. I get wanting to take care of your homegrown talent, but you have to make sure you pay people fairly. And for me, the playoffs for Immanuel Quickley was an extremely telling stat because he didn't show up in the playoffs when the lights were brightest. In the regular season, no doubt about it. If we're just looking at the regular season, Immanuel Quickley likely could have gotten, or you at least could have sold me on $100+ million contract on Immanuel Quickley. I could have believed it. But now, given what I've seen in the playoffs, there's no way I can adjust my mind to forget that from Immanuel Quickley. So that's going to have to hurt his value, and that's going to bring his cost down a little bit. Just think about how much money you're tying up to certain players coming off of your bench. Not only Josh Hart, not only Immanuel Quickley once he gets that new contract from the Knicks, but also that new free agent you signed in Dante DiVincenzo. All that money adds up, and we have to think about that. However, what I want to discuss is starting Immanuel Quickley. Because in my opinion, if you start IQ, you solve a lot of problems. We just talked about it. How can you justify giving somebody that much money, especially somebody who balled out for the New York Knicks last season, one of their best shooters, showed up in the regular season a lot of games, played for Jalen Brunson when he was hurt, and actually, in my opinion, showcased why he should be a starter last season when he did start for the New York Knicks when some players were out. Because I thought as a starter, he did extremely well. But let's look at some numbers for Immanuel Quickley from last season. So these are Quickley's numbers in terms of what he did last season. Shout out to Bleacher Report for these numbers. Quickley, again, is a 6'3" combo guard who has a unique skill set. He's a strong shooter, 37% on 5.6 attempts. One of the league's best rebounders, doesn't get talked about enough, 4.2 per game in 28.9 minutes. And he has playmaking and defensive upside. He finished second in Sixth Man of the Year award voting, and he averaged 14.9 points. That alone, given what he did the previous season and the leap he took defensively last season, and not only that, once his offense started coming together after November last season, arguably one of the best players on the Knicks, you could see why I'm saying that the New York Knicks should start Immanuel Quickley. Because all the things he gives you off the bench, he could give the starting unit and then some. And I believe that Immanuel Quickley and Jalen Brunson starting together for the New York Knicks is a great, lethal backcourt. And I argue, again, that Immanuel Quickley looked better as a starter last year than he did coming off the bench. You don't believe me? Take a look at the numbers. So again, from Bleacher Report, interestingly enough, Immanuel Quickley performed even better as a starter, putting up 22.6 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 5.1 assists in 21 games as part of the starting unit for the New York Knicks. Small sample size, sure. However, it's enough games where I can look at it and clearly see, that his numbers support him being a starter his numbers support that last season he performed better as a starter. But not only that, when you have the season like he had last year, when he's more consistent and reliable than Quentin Grimes is with his three-point shooting, we have to talk about that. He may not be as good of a defender as Quentin Grimes is, but he's just right there. If anything, if Quentin Grimes is right here, Immanuel Quickley is right there. It's so close, given how good he is on defense. And if you watched him last season, you saw how good he was on defense. You saw him locking up people in the corner. You saw him keeping people in front of him. You saw him being able to put his body in front of players, making it difficult for him. That's why he's been in the gym so much, working on his body. He looks chiseled. There are a number of main reasons that you'd want to start Immanuel Quickley for, and I've given you a lot of them in this video already. But one of the main other ones for me is value. Obviously, the New York Knicks are looking to trade for a superstar. And if you're looking to do that, Immanuel Quickley's name has been dangled around as a potential name to watch for the New York Knicks to trade in any type of deal for a star or potential superstar. If that's the case, how do you make somebody's value go up? By starting them, obviously. So if you start Immanuel Quickley, his value goes up. Then you don't have to worry about paying somebody that much money and having them sit on the bench because they'd be starting as well too. So it solves that problem. And not only that, think about it from a GM perspective. Would you rather trade one of your star players for another player who comes off the bench, albeit sixth man of the year or not? Or would you rather trade them for a starting caliber player instead? You'd probably go with the starting caliber player. If that's the case, it only helps and benefits the Knicks even more to start Immanuel Quickley. Again, it helps Immanuel Quickley's value. It helps the New York Knicks win a couple more games, in my opinion. It creates a lethal backcourt with Immanuel Quickley and Jalen Brunson. It helps justify the amount of money the New York Knicks may pay Immanuel Quickley. And of course, it puts Quentin Grimes back on the bench, where I argue he'd be able to thrive and showcase more of his game. It checks every single box imaginable for me. Again, you want to pay Immanuel Quickley? Go ahead. I'm all for it. But while you do so, make a change to the starting unit. Insert Immanuel Quickley, move Quentin Grimes to the bench, and watch how quickly, no pun intended, this New York Knicks team thrives. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a comment below, smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time, Knicks fans. Peace.